Hello and welcome to the 7th episode of the TES Leading and Learning webinar series. I'm Paul Spires, I'm host of the New P&L podcast and founder of the New P&L Institute, and I've been engaged by TES to host this 10-part series on insights, inspiration and information for leaders in the education sector, and indeed all of those who would like to lift their leadership and elevate their performance. This week's guest is Nadia Nagamootoo. Nadia is founder and CEO of Avenir Consulting, and she's also the author of Beyond Discomfort: Why Inclusive Leadership is So Hard. She's a keynote speaker and a consultant right across multiple industries. So Nadia, a very warm welcome to the TES Leading and Learning webinar series. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me, Paul.
It's my pleasure. Perhaps we can start the conversation with a quick overview of who you are, what you do, and who you do it for.
Yes, indeed. So my name is Nadia Nagamootoo, and I'm the founder and chief executive of Avenir, which is a company that I set up in 2015, I think it is. I have to remind myself. And my background is as a chartered business psychologist or occupational psychologist.
Right.
I've spent time in sort of local government. I've also spent here in the UK. I've also spent time consulting across various different, like globally, across different various industries around culture change, organizational development, diversity, equity and inclusion, and decided actually that the focus of Avenir was going to be around supporting those people who are at a disadvantage because of various reasons and different demographics and diversity characteristics that they hold. But identifying with a couple of those diversity characteristics myself, a few of them, it was personal to me, but
Yes.
also really, really important from a psychological perspective, because I have a background in business and psychology and culture change and leadership development. It kind of made sense that I was sort of piecing things together and going, actually, I think I can do some really good work in this space.
Yes.
So that's what we do at Avenir. We work with organizations to help leaders understand what it means to be inclusive in their practice, to develop an inclusive culture, and helping organizationally really just create a robust strategy where everyone feels like they're included, no matter who you are.
Yes, wonderful. And we're here today in part to discuss your new book, Beyond Discomfort: Why Inclusive Leadership is So Hard, and some of the lessons that it can perhaps offer leaders in the education sector specifically, given the nature of this webinar. So let's start with the obvious question, and let's turn your statement on the cover to a question. Tell me from your perspective, why is inclusive leadership so hard?
Indeed. So inclusive leadership is essentially really, really amazing leadership. It shouldn't really have an additional label to it. There's not leadership and then inclusive leadership. It's just really good leadership where the leader understands the uniqueness of the individuals who they're working with, and takes the time to really truly listen and see how current organizational systems and processes and culture might serve some more than others.
Yes.
However, that's not necessarily the type of leadership that we've been taught is the best way. We haven't necessarily taught to see things in that way. Leaders have been taught that actually, from an archetypal leadership, strong leadership, having clarity of goal, having strong messages, having charisma, a clear direction where you're taking your people, having the answers, that's what it means to be a really, really good leader.
Yes.
And so inclusive leadership is hard because we're inviting and encouraging leaders to see what fundamentally they believe is strong leadership in a different way, and challenging, therefore, some of the things that they're some of their fundamental beliefs. Like, if I just treat everyone the same, then that's me being inclusive, right? That's equality. So I've always been taught to disregard color or disregard gender, treat everyone the same. And that's what I've stood by. And now you're telling me that that's not what I should have been doing. And I've been doing it for the last like 3 decades
Yes. Yeah.
or so. So what does that say about me? So there's a huge amount of, and this is where my psychology comes in. This isn't just about it's hard because you have to develop new skills. This is it's hard because you have to develop new skills and because you have to take a really deep look at yourself, at your beliefs,
Yes.
emotionally, what it evokes in you, and work through those emotions where you might be tempted, those emotions, if they're spiked, might be tempted to get defensive or might be tempted to get annoyed or angry at this sudden change in, what it means to be a good leader all of a sudden. Now I'm not a good leader. I was like 5 years ago, and
Yes.
now
Yeah.
since include DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion work has started, now I'm suddenly not as good a leader, and that feels really uncomfortable. And there's a lot of fear around that, fear around the
Absolutely.
uncertainty, fear around change. So it's not a concise answer to your question, but I believe that inclusive leadership is hard because we're challenging people, leaders, at the very core of their belief system. And so when I was thinking about inclusive leadership, it was really important to acknowledge the stuckness at times that leaders feel. Like, I understand what you're telling me to do, but it just doesn't fit with my current lens or the way that I
Yes.
see the world. And that isn't fixed. The way we see the world is because we've always seen it that way, and we walk through the world and the world interacts with us because of certain things that we are. So for example, the color of our skin or our gender, because of some deeply held beliefs in and history and the way that certain individuals have been treated. So the way that society and the world treats me, for example, as a Mauritian woman, will be different to how it would treat you.
Yes.
Right? And visibly you look white and you look male. But correct me, obviously, if I'm wrong.
Well, I'm of Maori and European heritage.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool. Okay. So again, I don't like to assume, but just from a visual perspective, when the
Yes.
world will see us, if we were walk down the same street side by side, my experience of that walk would potentially be different to yours.
Yes, of course.
But there's nothing for you to feel guilty about, and it's certainly nothing for me to feel guilty about. It's just how the world works.
Yeah.
And so if the two of us are walking down the street, it requires your curiosity to want to firstly understand how my experience might differ from yours, which is also can be quite uncomfortable. But if you do enter into that and start challenging your reality and your truths about the way things are in the world, the facts that you might have made, your brain will automatically go, oh, okay, well, this is just how it is.
Yes.
Well, it might not be like that for everyone. And as long as you hold that, then that way of being, your way of being, shifts because you recognize that my way, as in the way that you interact with the world and how you experience the world, isn't the only one. And with that knowledge and with that view, it allows you to flex and shift. And so from an ontological perspective, your way of being, it's possible to shift based on how open and curious you are about other people.
So that requires a degree of consciousness in that moment to extend that curiosity, if you like, and to engage in that moment. What are the tools and techniques you can advise those who are listening today about how we exercise that muscle, if you like, that consciousness muscle, that curiosity muscle on an ongoing basis?
Yeah. It's incredibly challenging to do it all the time because we live very fast-paced lives. It's an always on where we don't really, speaking to the late Daniel Kahneman's work, where his book Thinking Fast and Slow, he talks about system 1 and system 2 thinking and how actually we're constantly on autopilot in the way that we think, often, and it takes conscious effort to slow down and be really mindful about our inner voice, our inner dialogue, what it's telling us about our interpretation of the world.
Yes.
Because unless we do that, our brains, not entirely as sophisticated as we'd like to think, our brains believe whatever the narrative that's going on in our head, believes it to be true, believes it to be fact.
Yeah.
Right. And we love binary as humans. We love either I'm right or I'm wrong.
Yes.
Right. Either I'm good or I'm bad. Right. And we find it hard to hold the nuance in between that.
Absolutely.
And so, I suppose in answer to your question, what we need to do is slow down in our thinking, be mindful, be conscious of what our inner voice is telling us when we spot something, or when emotionally something jars with us. We're like, oh, okay, so we've got another women's development program, that the organization's putting forward. Well, what about some people like me? Oh, okay, so now they're making it flexible if people want to come to this it was supposedly mandatory all staff event, just because they aren't able to make it in for whatever reason. That doesn't seem fair.
Right.
We hold fairness really close to our hearts, a very strong value for many of us, and if things jar with us in terms of fairness, doesn't seem right, we benchmark fairness against our own understanding of what fair is, not on someone else's judgment of what fairness is. That's why there's so much disagreement in the world, because what one person deems as fair and right, another person deems something else as fair and right. And so how do we hold our own deeply held belief that this is right, this is, or this is unfair, and allow ourselves to understand what the voice in our head is telling us, and just to open up a dialogue with it and say, okay, yeah, it's unfair to me because of, this is the belief that this is tapping into.
Yeah.
What could someone else's truth be here? What might be something that I'm not seeing that might allow me to better understand or see this in a different way? And that's not easy when we're on autopilot, because, we don't have the time. Our brain's just, it's gone, it's gone off on one, and that's, we believe we're right. And to be honest, it's the foundation of any disagreement, whether it's with your children, your partner, your friends. It's just like, we don't stop to think, could there be another way of seeing this? And that's really what I'm inviting people to do in my book.
So I want to expand on that a little bit more and just dig a little deeper into it, because it's very, and you touched on this in one of the earlier answers, it's very deeply and culturally and psychologically ingrained in leaders, and I think linked to imposter syndrome as well, that as leaders, we need to stop asking questions and provide all of the answers to other, but that we need that curiosity to lead to, as you rightly highlight, to the empathy and understanding that is critical to more inclusive leadership. So how do we encourage leaders, educational leaders or otherwise business leaders, to ask more questions and to be more curious without feeling that they are compromising their own authority in the process?
It's a really good one. That's a good question. And I think this comes down to, I mean, you said the word authority there, right? Compromising their authority. And to me, this comes down to, unfortunately, human desire for power. And we do have, you see it around the world, this constant need and striving for power. And when we have power, wanting to hold on to it, right? So it feels like, to your words there, it feels like I might be compromising my authority. I might be compromising my power, right? This is my earned place. This is how we like to feel it. We like to feel we have earned our place through hard work, through grit and determination, through our education. We have earned where we are, and that has earned us power. Okay, so actually what this means is, could my curiosity and open-mindedness to see that actually someone else's reality could have been different, and they might not have had the opportunities that I did to earn that power.
Mm-hmm.
What does that say? Firstly, about me and my self-worth and the value that I placed upon myself. Because if I fundamentally believed I earned my place, and now I'm being challenged that it could have been, some of it could have been partly to do with the color of my skin or my gender or my sexuality or some of those, majority group characteristics, so to speak. That's quite a hard pill to swallow, really uncomfortable. But secondly, what does that mean in terms of my next move? Do I have to relinquish some of that power? Is my authority going to be compromised in order to create this equity that everyone's talking about, in order to give other people who haven't had the chances that I have to allow them to have those chances?
Yes.
And it can feel really uncomfortable, and there's a lot of fear there about giving up something, having to give up in order to gain other people to gain, and that doesn't feel right. Why should I have to lose out in order for other people to take the places of
Yes.
those people who have traditionally been in power, in authority? Are you saying that we're not doing a good job? I mean, there's a huge amount of emotion there, if you think about it: anger, frustration, defensiveness, just to name a few. How do we support leaders to navigate that? And I think the answer really is, it can't be forced. Obviously, we can't force anyone to see something that they don't really want to see, or go
Yes.
somewhere, or be open-minded when they don't really. My book offers sort of some coaching style questions, reflective questions. And really it's holding a leader's hand to say, okay, when you consider what it might feel like that your power that you have, your authority, your status, might be something to do with some of your diversity characteristics. How does that make you feel? Reflect on it. Do you have to do anything with it? Just notice it. Notice the emotions that come up. Because I think that we can't immediately get leaders to jump to action. It's like, oh, we're going to solve this. Let's do this. Because of course they're not going to be fully on board. I mean, it's a bit of a long shot, to consider that they'd just be willing, like a drop of a hat, just to kind of give up everything that they've believed and everything they've worked for. So I think that reflective practice, allowing them and holding their hand to go a little bit deeper into just self-reflection, understanding, well, where does that emotion come from? What might I do with that? How does it, when I hear of these diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, what are some of the thoughts that pop into my head that I might not say out loud, but actually I'm questioning? Just notice them. Notice them. And that's your way of being. That's your lens that you see the world. And it's incredibly precious to everyone. And what was really important to me when I wrote the book was to ensure that no one felt guilty for their way of being. Right? It's who you are. It's, unless you've had some work, you've worked deeply on yourself, you've never taken necessarily the time, why would you have, to ask yourself these questions, to think more deeply about, we don't generally start questioning our fundamental beliefs.
Yes.
It's not something we do on a regular basis. Why would we? Otherwise we would get stuck in the world. We wouldn't get anything done. So, and this isn't about challenging every belief that you have, by the way. It's just simply noticing when if you notice an emotion that, sits uncomfortably with you, or, just name it, think about it. And what does that say about how you see the world? And I really think that that's the first step. If all leaders did that and were more self-reflective, I do think we would be in a better place, because we just have that curiosity, which I do think is fundamentally lacking in a lot of leadership.
So we naturally, as humans, we naturally gravitate towards comfort, to find stability, to find comfort. obviously you're proposing in the book, we're having a conversation about moving beyond discomfort, moving into discomfort. How do we get comfortable with discomfort? What are the characteristics, what are the foundations of being comfortable in discomfort?
Yeah. So it takes practice, okay? It takes holding your emotion, whatever it is, that discomfort, the fear. Often there's fear that sits behind discomfort, by the
Yes.
way. Often, a fear of, I name it in the book, so a fear of change, a fear of complexity, or I won't have the right answers, I won't know what I'm doing, a fear of saying the wrong thing, of misstepping, and then being cancelled. Yeah, we have this big kind of cancel culture. Oh, they got it wrong, we never see them again, right? So there's a huge amount of fear, and that's
Yes.
that kind of what the emotion, if we were to name it, underpins the discomfort. And so recognizing what that is really important, and holding it and be able to say, okay, I am concerned about misstepping here. This is something that could hold me back, especially in the moment. If you witness something that's exclusionary, someone said or done something to someone else and you see it, it's really tough in the moment to be able to call it out or say something,
Yeah.
because you have that fear. There's a lot of pressure around, well, what if I say it wrong? Did I actually see or hear what I thought I heard? What if that person who said it or did it isn't very amenable to me offering a comment? What if that person is in power and then that impacts me and my career? I mean, there's just a huge amount of stuff going on
Yes.
in our
Yeah.
head. And so being able to say, okay, where's the courage? What's the thing that I need to do in myself, whether I do it in the moment, and if the moment passes, it's okay, right? It's okay, but to hold that to, and to understand, not just to kind of go, oh, well, that happened and I'll just park it because it was a really difficult moment. I probably should have said something, but I didn't. And we have all been there where we can probably think of moments where we could have said something and didn't. And then it feels uncomfortable because like you feel really guilty because you should have said something, rather than just pushing it to the deepest depths
Yes.
of your memory. Actually start processing it and thinking, and then thinking, well, what might I have said? What might I have done in that moment? And then the next time, to be able to say something, do something that's different, and show the courage.
Yes.
That courage is so important, and to recognize where to get that courage from. And it comes with knowledge. So doing some reading, listening to TED Talks or podcasts, expanding your understanding. So that comes, then confidence comes, right,
Yes.
with increased knowledge. It comes with seeing it being role modeled by people around you, or listening to people who have demonstrated that courage in the past. So really seeking to find out, how could I do this better?
Yeah.
And then it comes from trying it out, and it being okay to get it wrong. And sometimes it's not all on you to do that, because the organizational culture needs to make it okay also for you to get it wrong.
Your book offers a huge amount of real life examples, practical examples as to how people can open up that opportunity around inclusion, how they can consciously and unconsciously bring in more inclusivity into their conversations, into the way they administer their business, or in this case, the education. I think it would be great for the audience to hear some practical examples and some techniques for them to try and apply in their business or in their organizations.
Yeah, okay. Um, so so we spoke about, just said about, sort of increasing your knowledge and understanding. And I think that's really, really important, where you find different ways of accessing diversity of experiences, right? And so you might, for example, join an employee employee group, that a network group that you don't necessarily identify with. So, for example, if you're a heterosexual person, you might just join the LGBTQ plus community network in your organization, and just, obviously with permission, sit, listen, understand, and what we call an ally. So someone who's just keen to understand what their experiences are. And at that point, it's just a matter of listening in and sitting in and just being open to understanding someone else's truth and reality. And that in itself is huge, being able to expand and your own immediate, if you think about the people who you directly have communication and relationships with, how diverse really are they? Because they're the people who are fueling your kind of thoughts. They're facilitating your thinking.
Yes.
So how could you increase that? And that might be in your organization, or it might be through TED Talks, for example, or reading different books. There's lots of books that you can pick up now. There's so much to understand different people's experiences. And I think that knowledge piece is so important. And you could then, whilst you've taken ownership to expand your own understanding, you can then lean in and invite with curiosity, genuine curiosity, someone else, just to have an open conversation with someone about their experiences. And the reason I say that the knowledge needs to come before you start that conversation is because what's important is that you don't rely on people who are different to you. You don't rely on them to educate you.
Yes.
And because actually that's not their role. They shouldn't carry that burden of having to educate other people. Yeah. What we need to do is demonstrate that we're curious. We've done some reading, but then we've got a few more questions that maybe certain other people might be able to answer. And by doing that, and if leaders really embrace that, that culture change around inclusion and embracing diversity shifts.
Yes.
They show courage to ask new questions, and they also, and what's also amazing practice for leaders, is to say really openly, I might get this wrong. This is what I'm practicing. This is some of the work that I've been doing. I genuinely want to try and support creating a more inclusive team, a more inclusive organization, but I'm not perfect. And that humility and being able to share that, and people respond to that. People don't want or need you to be perfect. They just need to see that you care and you're trying and you're interested in who they are, and with that information, what you then do with it.
Yes.
It's like, oh, okay, I didn't realize, that in those meetings where there's so many people speaking, that you have something to say, but you're not really sure how to insert your perspective. Or I have never really realized that, we're the ones who ask you to, we ask you to take notes all the time. And it hadn't occurred to me. That's okay, as long as we then do something with it.
Yeah.
So that, that's just, if your organization is willing to invest, obviously, then like reverse mentoring programs are really helpful. So for leaders to actually have access to and being paired with someone who's very different to them at lower levels of the organization. Again, not leaning on them to guide them and tell them exactly how to be an inclusive leader, but just to have that insight and for it to be a two-way benefit. So those sorts of programs are helpful. Sponsorship programs are equally helpful. We're running one of those with one of our clients at the moment, and that's for women and non-binary individuals, a specific target group, because of the statistics in their organization. But the sponsor, who's an executive level, is gaining as much as the more junior woman non-binary person, because they're hearing these stories and suddenly having access to insight of what that person's reality is.
Yes.
Lower down in the organization, potentially of a different diversity characteristics to them. So all of that data, surveys, get information, inclusion surveys. Again, that's something that we do at Avenir, and it just provides this overall understanding how different people are experiencing the organization. So I think that knowledge is so important. And just to start, you build your courage with confidence, of knowledge, through knowledge.
Yes. You discussed in the book privilege, and we've alluded to it earlier on in this conversation, and it's a
Yeah.
word that in certain quarters it creates a lot of divisiveness and defensiveness, as you suggested earlier. How do we disarm that defensiveness but still have that important conversation around privilege?
Yeah. So, yeah, but privilege, for some reason, it's become a sort of a bit of a dirty word. It's like, what do you mean I've got privilege? You can really see someone's defensiveness, sort of their armor going up. And it is because people don't like to be told that they've got to where they are through anything else other than their pure talent and how
Yes.
amazing they are. And there are two types of privilege. And this is something, there's a great book called Growing the Elephant by Chris Altizer and Gloria Johnson Cusack. And they distinguish between earned advantage and unearned advantage.
Right.
Um, and that absolutely, there are certain, we can't take away that people have earned some power, that they've done things and they've worked really hard. No one's wanting to take away from that. But that framing and being able to split out your privilege with things, actually the privilege because I earned it, because I worked really hard to be where I am, no one should ever take away from. And your unearned advantage, the privilege that you have simply because historically the world has treated and seen and viewed people like you in a certain way, or that, for example, we know that the patriarchy in society around, it stems from, historically, men have been viewed as superior, right? And we see it, even though many of us don't believe that now, we still see it in how generally organizations look from a visual perspective, where the men are, who gets promoted. We can see it statistically and in kind of blind CVs, when people are applying for jobs and, more men get sifted in. So the bias is deep within the system. And so to be able to hold that understanding and say, you know what, I might have some unearned advantage. That doesn't I shouldn't feel guilty about that. It's the way historically our society has promoted certain people, and I just happen to fall into a category where I'm seen as more positive. And then it might be, and it might have been, I can never measure it. I won't be able to say, like, in this specific amount I have been advantaged, but I can say with some certainty that I would have possibly had some unearned advantage because of who I am.
Yeah.
And I think separating those two, so if you were able to disentangle your emotion to the word privilege and just kind of hold it as a concept of some things I have earned, and I should feel really good about and proud about, and some things I might have not earned because of some of the diversity characteristics I'm not going to feel guilty about that, but actually it's my responsibility when I recognize them, to be able to, with curiosity, wonder how someone else's experience in their life might have been when I walked through a door that was open, who experienced something different, maybe a locked door where they had to take, it took them time to find the key before they were to open the door and walk through it. And what's my responsibility as a leader to inquire and to see what I'm not seeing at the moment, which is those locked doors, and be able to help those people find the key.
Yes. It's a great explanation, really good
Yeah.
explanation. Nadia, we always in the episode with, as we do with all episodes, with a summary of 3 concise and final pieces of actionable wisdom for our education leaders. And we use the TES acronym for that to help embed these points in our minds. So T is for talk. So when it comes to the inclusive leadership, what is the most important thing educational leaders need to do to communicate effectively the benefits of inclusive leadership in their school or educational establishment? What can they do to communicate the benefits of inclusive leadership better?
When I sort of hear a leader speaking about why it's personally important to them, it makes a huge difference. I see that the authenticity. And there's also an element of vulnerability there with someone sharing a personal story. Being able to say, I stand for diversity, equity, and inclusion is one thing. Being able to say, I have a personal experience of this, whether it's yourself, and we have all experienced exclusion at some point in our lives. I mean, you can't get to adulthood without experiencing some form of exclusion. But it might be to do with your children, it might be to do with a family member, your partner, your parents. It could be anything, but being able to speak and communicate the importance to you personally helps other people. That storytelling is so powerful. It helps other people connect it to their own story and their own personal reason why.
And in terms of E, that's for engage and excite. What is the most important thing educational leaders need to do to engage their employees, to engage staff members, teachers, to understand the true value of inclusive leadership?
There's something about transparency of the data and information. I spoke a bit earlier about what data and information to collect about your organization to really understand. Hold a mirror up. The exec team should be holding a mirror up and going, we didn't realize this and this isn't okay. But to engage the whole organization is not just the exec team's responsibility to create organizational change. They are responsible, obviously, but they can't do it by themselves. So you need to engage everyone. So that means everyone needs to be aware of how different people are experiencing the organization. And they need to see that the executive team are genuinely wanting to see a change in this, that they're saying that the exec team are saying the words, but they're doing something differently as well. They're putting resources into it. They are wanting actively to put their own time and build their own understanding. So unless it's all well and good seeing the data, but unless people see that the exec team are investing in it themselves and their own learning, often leaders need a helping hand to understand what it means to be an inclusive leader as well. And that we spend months working, delivering our inclusive leadership program to help these leaders do that so that they can then role model and people can see, gosh, they're working on themselves. They genuinely mean that they want to see this change. Otherwise, there's a shed load of cynicism in the organization with them just saying it's just a tick box. They've done the work, they've had a look, but actually nothing's really changing. So people need to see a change in the leadership. And that's what will ultimately engage. I don't run a load of unconscious bias workshops throughout the organization and hope that's going to energize or excite. It's not. People will see and they'll follow if investment is made at the very top and and leaders genuinely are embracing it and they see a different type of leadership.
And S is for sustain. So in terms of sustaining that momentum over time, what is the most important thing educational leaders need to do to ensure it becomes a core component of an organization's thinking and its culture, that there's a deeply embedded commitment over time to inclusive leadership?
Again, this is the very senior leaders continuously listening and being curious. Because it's all well and good to say, okay, well, we've done that now. We put that initiative in place and we've, these are some of the successes and let's celebrate that. But the thing is with organizational culture, it's constantly evolving. And there'll be a constant need to, that mirror that I said to hold up and really understand how different people experience the organization. Once you've then, 12 months later have put some things in place to try and to address those, to checking in again, right? And asking again. And hopefully seeing some positive shift, obviously, in the inclusion culture, but also recognizing, but there's still work to do here. And so it's a constant cycle. It will never stop, right? But recognizing that that resource needs to be put in place. They need to have someone who is helping maintain that momentum. It needs to be someone's responsibility who's directly sitting on the board, has
Yes.
contact with the board. But whilst it's their role to help generate momentum and make it sustainable, it isn't their role to create an inclusive culture full stop by themselves.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's sometimes also the pitfall. It's like, oh, well, we've got Nadia in place, so she's sorting out the diversity, equity, inclusion stuff, and we'll just do business as usual. It's like,
Yes.
no,
Yeah.
no. So definitely resource it, continue to resource it, but don't put sole responsibility then to see change on that one or team of people. Is that exec team need to be actively engaged. It needs to be in the board meeting agenda as a standing item every month, and they need to be actively sponsoring different, employee resource groups. They need to be actively seen to be doing things. This is hard because you don't want to overburden. It's not
Yes.
but it's not putting extra onto them. It's just about how do they demonstrate their leadership in a different way. We're not asking you to do your leadership and demonstrate inclusion. We're
Yes.
asking you, this is what we're expecting of you as a leader.
Absolutely. And great advice to end on. Nadia, for those who would like to learn more about what you do, to purchase Beyond Discomfort, where do they find you? How do they learn about you?
So, well, I'm on LinkedIn and I'm on Instagram. So if you just search for my name at Nadia Nagamootoo on Instagram, and then just type in my name on LinkedIn. And I'm very active on both. My book is available on Amazon, no matter country you're in, and also in a lot of the bookstores in the UK.
Well, we'll include the links in the notes that accompany the webinar as well. And Nadia, it's been a great opportunity to meet you and have a conversation with you. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me, Paul.
Pleasure. So thank you for listening to this episode of the TES Leading and Learning webinar series. We'll be back again in May with another fantastic new guest. As I mentioned in our conversation with Nadia, all the links to where she works, what she does, and her book will be included in the notes that accompany this webinar. So I'm Paul Spires, founder of the New P&L Institute, your guest host for this TES Leading and Learning webinar. Thank you so much for your time, and see you next month.